The United States has officially designated Qatar as a major non-NATO ally. The move upgrades the partnership between Doha and Washington. It also gives the Gulf country special economic and military privileges in its relationship with the United States. US President Joe Biden issuing a presidential declaration formally announcing the change on Thursday. This comes weeks after a pledge that he made to Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Thani. The two leaders met at the White House in late January. Biden says designating Qatar a major non-NATO ally of the United States is aimed at reflecting the importance of the two nations' relationship. He says that the move is long overdue. Qatar is now the third country in the Gulf region after Kuwait and Bahrain to become a US major non-NATO ally. We're joined now by THEMBISA FAKUDE. He's a senior research fellow at the Africa-Asia Dialogues. Very good evening to you, THEMBISA, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So, Qatar is one of the largest producers of liquefied natural gas. Could the Russia-Ukraine conflict and resultant sanctions have speeded this up? But the reason for the appointment by the United States?
Well, Qatar and the United States have had a very healthy relationship, particularly after the return of the Taliban in Afghanistan. If you remember, Qatar played a very important role in terms of negotiating that deal, which eventually paved the way for the Taliban to assume power in Afghanistan. After that, Qatar was granted a very special status by the United States, being a representative of the United States in Afghanistan. And that responsibility involved issuing of visas and other diplomatic responsibilities on behalf of the United States in Afghanistan. And when the foreign nationals of various countries were evacuated from Kabul, most of them went via Doha. And Doha also accepted a number of refugees from Afghanistan who were working with various multinationals in Afghanistan during just before the Taliban took over. So the relationship has been very healthy between Qatar and the United States. And importantly, of course, is that Qatar currently hosts the largest US military base, Al Udeid, which is in Doha, or just outside Doha in Qatar. So the relationship is quite healthy, and this was expected. And I think it just adds on what already exists between the two countries.
I mean, some would say there is a need to understand how Qatar went from outcast to ally, and now particularly in the Biden administration, as you say, a close relationship. So perhaps let's look at the history of the two countries. I know you've spoken a little bit more about it, but before that, how Qatar became an outcast at some point for the United States.
Well, the relationship kind of soured during the times of Trump, especially after the blockade, which occurred when Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Bahrain, and United Arab Emirates laid a blockade against Qatar. And it was during the time of Trump that the relationship between the United States and Qatar kind of soured. But before that, they've always held a relationship, hence the presence of the largest military base in the Middle East, which is based in Qatar. So the relationship were fairly tense during the time of Saddam Hussein, of Donald Trump. And when the Saudi Arabia also changed guard, and Mohammed bin Salman, who's the current de facto leader and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, took over, and he decided on blockading Qatar both economically and politically, the relationship actually did sour, because there was a very close relationship at the time between Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, Jared Kushner, who was the special advisor to Donald Trump, and his son-in-law. So that relationship did, to an extent, foster a certain type of attitude from the United States towards Qatar. But over the years, they've always enjoyed a very friendly relationship and a very productive relationship, and they've managed to keep the Al Udeid military base in Qatar going, notwithstanding that the 4-year tenure of Donald Trump actually nearly it destroyed a very healthy relationship.
And as you mentioned that the cutting of diplomatic ties, Iran was one of those countries that pointed a finger at Qatar. Just in terms of other diplomatic relations and the importance thereof, what role could Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, if at all, with regards to nuclear talks with Iran?
Well, Qatar is likely to play a very important role, even though it's not currently involved in the discussions that are currently taking place between Europeans, United States, and Iran. But Qatar enjoys a very healthy relationship with all parties involved in these negotiations of trying to normalize relationships between Iran and these countries. And Qatar is a neighbor of Iran just across the Gulf. You have Iran, and Iran, if you remember, came in quite handy when the three Gulf states decided to blockade or to block Qatar from economic and political activity. So Qatar and Iran has a very, very strong relationship. So Qatar can be seen as a mediator or possible mediator because it enjoys good relationship with the United States, it enjoys good relationship with Iran, and it also enjoys a good relationship with the P5, that is the other five permanent members of the United Security Council who are currently involved in negotiating with Iran in what is now known as the normalization of nuclear project between Iran and its neighbors.
All right, so go back to the original question that I asked. I'm sure it's no accident that Qatar is one of the largest producer of liquefied natural gas. Given the current energy crisis that is being anticipated because of the Russia-Ukraine war, that's certainly a good friend to have.
Yeah, and many people were suggesting that Qatar could just increase the production of its gas in order to augment what the possible shortfall as a result of Russia's sanctioning by European countries and United States. So Qatar sits quite comfortable at the moment, even though, of course, they do also enjoy a good relationship with the Russians. But it's likely that Qatar will increase its produce of gas in particular, and that might just help in terms of alleviating problems, especially within the United States and the European countries as they continue sanctioning and threatening. At least United States has declared that it's not going to be importing any gas and petrol from Russia henceforth. But European countries remain in a very difficult position because some of the European countries rely on Russia 100% for their gas supplies. So Qatar could come in handy, but the only challenge, of course, is that there's no pipeline between Qatar and the European countries. Qatar will, by and large, rely on maritime transportation in terms of supplying gas to the Europeans, which might just take time to do so. So Russia will remain key moving forward, but I think Qatar is now considering options of ensuring that it comes in as an alternative supplier as the sanctions continue to bite Russia.
So just going back to the status that's been given to Qatar, that being of a designated major non-NATO ally, as we mentioned that it's the third country in the Gulf region to enjoy the status. But what does it really do for it? Does, as we mentioned, that it amps up the relationship, but what is strategic to the Qatari US relations for Qatar at this point?
Well, first, it's prestigious, I guess. Even though they've got about 20 other countries in the world who enjoy the same relationship with United States. Qatar is the third, as I've said, in the Gulf, following Bahrain and Kuwait. So it gives Qatar its status. But importantly, of course, Qatar got this status before its competitor, in inverted commas, which is Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. So this places Qatar in a much, much more prestigious position in the region when it comes to relationships with the United States and the outside world. Notwithstanding, of course, that there's already that Al Udeid military base, which I've talked about, and the relationship which has improved since Qatar mediated between the Taliban and the United States. Qatar still remains in Afghanistan, by the way, as a representative of the United States in terms of issuing visas and all other diplomatic efforts, because the United States has still not recognized the Taliban's government as legitimate. So Qatar continues to play that role. So the relationship, what this will bring, other than just being prestigious, because of course Qatar is not the first one in the region nor in the world, but it also, I guess, to an extent, rub a bit of salt to the wound, particularly to the two competitors, as I've said earlier, which is Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, because those two would have preferred, given that Donald Trump preferred them, particularly Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, preferred them in terms of having strong relations in the past. We have seen that with Joe Biden, the interest and political preference has shifted into Qatar. So Qatar now becomes the most important player in the region in terms of being a conduit between the region and the United States, a very important political player in the Gulf.
And I mean, we've just seen how effectively countries have been told and have done so, taken aside at the UN Security Council meetings, the General Assembly, over this Iraq-Ukraine conflict. Is that how it's going to play out for many countries, that you are going to have to pick a side, and that you'll certainly have to nail your colors to the mast at the United Nations?
Well, I think that's going to be the trend moving forward. But you mentioned something very important, which I think I forgot to mention, was, if you remember, United Arab Emirates at the UN Security Council decided to abstain, and this could be a backlash from the United States of recognizing Qatar and giving them that major non-NATO ally, just to spite the United Arab Emirates, who went against the United States in that vote, if you remember, last week. So, but what I think will happen is, moving forward, is Qatar will, and many other countries, of course, will move away from this moral equivalency which we have seen practiced by many countries. In other words, regarding both sides as equally responsible for the war, even though we know, of course, that the aggressor in this regard is Russia, and Russia deserves to be condemned. And many countries have decided to come up with this new moral equivalence, including our own country, South Africa, dealing with the situation as if all is equal, and the warring parties in this war are equal. I think what we'll see happening moving forward, not only at the insistence of the Americans and the Europeans, but we're going to start seeing countries also taking independent positions in this regard, particularly as we continue seeing those atrocities in Russia. So it's going to be, it's either with us once again or you're against us. And Europeans are now becoming very clear in terms of their choice and preference in this regard. They've insisted on their ally to take a very clear position. And there is an element of collective kind of punishment for those that do not follow the so-called instructions from the European and the United States to support what's been going on. In fact, the collective bargaining and dealing with Russia when it comes to matters of energy, that's also likely to influence politics preference from smaller European countries who would have ordinarily preferred to continue to have multilateral, or not multilateral, but more bilateral relations with Russia. But because there's this collective positioning, you are likely to see even other countries in Europe following suit, led by the French and of course of Germany, who are insisting that Europe must continue insisting on one particular position when it comes to Russia outside NATO.
Thank you so much for your time and your insights, as well as THEMBISA FAKUDE, Senior Research Fellow at the Africa-Asia Dialogues. All right, that's